everyone. Welcome back to another Ashram Talks discussion. Today, we're going to think a little bit about whether we're focusing more on the destination or the journey. Personally, when I do a lot of things, I find myself getting so nervous or hyper-focused on the result, and sometimes we totally lose track of the process. But how freeing would it be if we could go through life, try our best, enjoy what we're doing, and kind of detach a little bit from wanting that outcome to be a specific way? So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this topic today through the lens of the Bhagavad Gita, of course. And we're joined again by Krsnacandra Dasa from New York. Welcome, Krsnacandra Dasa. Thank you for joining us again today.
Hare Krishna, it's an absolute privilege to be here. I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, we are extremely grateful. So without further ado, we can get started whenever you're ready.
Fantastic. I'm ready when you are. Do we, I think we have the verse first, correct? Oh, perfect. Excuse me. Okay, we are going to do Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 7. Yastvis indriyani manasa niyam yarabhate arjuna karmendriyaye karma yogam astakasa vishyasyate. On the other hand, he who controls the senses by the mind and engages his active organs in works of devotion without attachment is by far superior. Before we begin with the talk, I'd like to start with a prayer. Om Anjana Timidhandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Brindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Prihe Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gora Bhakta Vrihinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. In order to properly take Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 7 into context, I think it's important for us to do at least a cursory review of the previous verse, verse 6. One who restrains the senses and organs of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. Now, this is a sharp contrast to the person described in verse 7, who controls the senses by the mind and engages his active organs in works of devotion. Now, one hypothetical example of the pretender in verse 6 that can come to mind is a priest or monk who may externally appear to be restrained from the typical staples of sense enjoyment offered in the world, such as pursuit of wealth or even the pursuit of romantic relationships, since monks from virtually all major traditions practice celibacy. But yet their mind would continue to dwell on these aforementioned desires instead of offering a flower of love and devotion for God. In some cases, such desires may even come to fruition, not because they are spiritually healthy, but because Krishna is so merciful that he fulfills even material desires when one approaches him. The holy name is so powerful that it can award material results, liberation, or pure devotion. But fulfillment does not always indicate purification. In such situations, the individual is not cheating Krishna, rather, they are cheating themselves, mistaking the satisfaction of material desires for genuine spiritual advancement while maintaining an external appearance of yogic control and speaking pleasantly about esoteric philosophy. In verse 7, Krishna calls out this major pitfall of superficial sense control and illuminates the path of sincere devotion. And we've seen this theme before in chapter 2, verse 59, when Krishna tells Arjuna the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. Imagine for a moment that you're marooned on a small deserted island. Think of all the insatiable desires ignited by the material world as being the vast ocean that separates you from the mainland, your home. One simply cannot swim in the ocean from a deserted island to get back home because the ocean will eventually consume you whole. To get back home, you'll need a boat. And not just any boat, but a strong boat capable of traversing the ocean and returning to the mainland. Think of the weaker boats, like a life raft or a dinghy, as being mere recitations of esoteric but dry philosophy. Devotion to Krishna, by contrast, is the strong vessel that can lead you back home. Directing your desires to Krishna and his devotees, you start to develop and nurture the higher tastes that Krishna speaks about in chapter 2, verse 59. The material energy is constantly in a state of flux, and so is the karma of every Bhadajiva. When a Bhadajiva is otherwise known as the souls conditioned by the material energy. Money will always come and go. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 14, Krishna tells Arjuna, "O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Happiness and distress will come and go like seasons. It's inevitable. Good karma obtained through righteous acts will eventually burn up like the last molecules of sweet incense. Just as bad karma received by bad acts will inevitably fade away like the end of a bad storm. Even when one accepts the message of the Bhagavad Gita as truth, it is difficult, especially for one beginning this path, to immediately dismiss happiness and distress as transitory. The pull is far too great. The attraction for sense enjoyment is overpowering, and the pain from the distress of this world can knock us out and debilitate us. That is one reason why many people resort to substance abuse, which can compound our getting stuck in the web of the material world. This is what makes the higher taste, as expressed in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 59, essential. But how does one attain the higher taste? It's straightforward to say to just engage oneself into dovetailing into acts of spiritual devotion. Even by going to your first kirtan, which is kirtan is devotional chanting sessions, or eating prasadam, and prasadam is spiritually sanctified food offered to God, or by relishing the pastimes of Krishna and his expansions. And one way to do that is to read Bhagavad Gita, or the book that comes from Bhagavad Gita, the Mahabharata, or other um, books that celebrate Krishna's pastimes. One, by doing all these things, one takes their first steps into a larger world of bhakti yoga and experiences the first sensations of transcendental enjoyment. Although one starts with a small desire for higher taste, that taste can inspire a conflagration within the heart, where one first largely driven by Vaidhi Bhakti, which is more duty bound and like ritualistic. Just think of it as the letter of the law versus the spirit or the heart of the law. That's one comparison used by Jesus in Christianity in the New Testament. Um, but at some point on the path, one becomes largely driven by what is called Raganuga Bhakti. And Raganuga Bhakti means devotional practice inspired by spontaneous love. It begins when the heart naturally feels drawn to Krishna, not by obligation, rule, or duty, but affection, pure affection. And when one's worship of Krishna is largely governed by spontaneous love and affection, their senses are no longer controlled by dry renunciation. And instead, they are naturally drawn to the higher taste. That's what is spoken about in Bhagavad Gita 259. And they will engage their active organs in works of devotion, motivated by sheer love and affection and not duty. Um, and that's not an artificial process that can be forced. It's the natural progression of the heart that has tasted and relishes this devotion for God and wants more and more. Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 verse 7 teaches that real control comes not from suppressing the senses, but from positively engaging them in devotion. When devotion becomes natural, spontaneous, and full of taste, the mind stays absorbed in Krishna, even while performing simple duties. Raganuga Bhakti is simply that principle taken to its highest form. But what does such a person engaged in Raganuga Bhakti look and sound like? And that question echoes the question in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 54, when Arjuna asked Krishna, "What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak, and what is his language? How does he sit, and how does he walk?" The best example that resonates with me is Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was a venerable guru born almost 200 years ago in India. He was the father of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. He, in turn, was the guru of Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who famously propagated both the Bhagavad Gita and the Hare Krishna Mahamantra worldwide. With such a richly spiritual CV, it's easy to imagine Bhaktivinoda as a studious monk in a temple or a renunciate living in a cave, but he was a well respected magistrate in colonial India. He had a large family with many active responsibilities, including raising the child who would become Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. Bhakti Vinod, whom our tradition calls the seventh Goswami, after the six Goswamis that have propagated the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, often expressed profound spiritual truths in the form of simple songs. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote one short bhajan called Dekite Dekite, where he reveals the inner longing of a Gaudiya practitioner whose mind has moved far beyond this world and has become absorbed in Krishna's eternal spiritual abode of Vraj, especially in the service of Krishna's chief consort and most dearly beloved, Srimati Radharani. This is an example of positive absorption, the exact opposite of the hypocritical restraint described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 6. This is the mind fully controlled not by force, but by love. Before I sing and discuss this bhajan, I want to share something very simple. In my own life, one place I felt a taste, just a taste of spontaneous devotion, the kind that arises without force, was through caring for Tulsi Devi, as she manifests in this material world as the Tulsi plant. Just by watering her, singing, and speaking to her gently, began to create kind of a soft affection in my heart. I didn't plant it, it grew naturally through service. And this is how Raganuga Bhakti can begin, not with high meditations or esoteric practices, but with simple service that awakens love. I would like to sing each verse of this bhajan one at a time and then reflect briefly on the meaning. Thank you. Dekite, dekite, bulibova kabe, nijastula pari choya, nayana heribo, brajapura shobha, nitya chidananda moya. When will I be able to leave this plane of my gross bodily identity far behind? Within a split second, I will completely forget about all these false external affairs and behold the exquisite beauty of the transcendental realm of Vraj, which is completely paraded with eternal conscious bliss. In this first verse, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur expresses a longing to leave behind the heavy shell of bodily identity, not by repression, but by being pulled upward by the beauty of Vraj. He's not fighting with the senses. He is not wrestling with the mind. His mind is already somewhere else. It's absorbed in a realm of conscious divine bliss. This is the folding, the unfolding of Raganuga Bhakti. The mind naturally running toward Krishna, just as the Gita describes true sense control in verse 3:7. Here's verse 2. Vrishabhanu pure janamalohi bo yavata vivaha hobe Brajagopi bhava hohe besva bhava hanu bhava naro hibe. I shall then take birth in Varshana, the town of King Vrishabhanu, and I will be married nearby in the town of Yavat. My soul disposition and character shall be that of a simple cowherd girl, and I shall not know any other mood. Here, the longing becomes more specific. The practitioner begins to identify not with the material body, but with a spiritual aspiration to be born in Vrishabhanu Maharaj's village. Vrishabhanu Maharaj is the father of Srimati Radharani, who is Krishna's chief consort and his dearmost devotee. To marry in Yavat, to live simply as a cowherd girl with one mood, serving Srimati Radharani, the greatest devotee of Krishna. This is divine direction. A heart attracted to Srimati Radharani develops a sense of spiritual home. Varshana, Yavat, Vrindavan. The Gita says, engage your active organs in works of devotion. Here, Bhaktivinoda shows the inner application. The mind engages in its eternal service identity within Vraj, within the spiritual world. Verse 3. Nija siddha deha, nija siddha nama, nija rupa svavasana, Radha kripa bole lobi vakabe Krishna prema prakarana. I shall obtain my own eternal spiritual body, transcendental name, and specific type of beauty, and dress for the pleasure of Krishna. And when, by the power of Sri Radha's causeless mercy, will I be allowed entrance into the pastimes of divine love of Krishna? In this verse, Bhaktivinoda expresses the yearning for one's eternal spiritual form, one's swarup, name, dress, beauty, all given for the pleasure of Krishna. These verses are not meant for imitation, but for inspiration, showing us the direction of perfected devotion. This is the heart of Raganuga Bhakti, not imitation, not ambition, not pride, but the humble prayer. When will Sri Radha, out of causeless mercy, allow me even a tiny entrance into her service? Controlled senses, a controlled mind. But now the mind is controlled because it is absorbed in a higher, sweeter attraction. This is the perfection hinted at in Bhagavad Gita 3:7. Here's the final verse 4. Jamuna shalilaha aharanegiyaha Puchibo yugala rasa prema mugda hoye pagalini prayaha gahibo radhara yashaha. As I go with a water pot on my head to draw water from the Yamuna River, I shall cherish remembrance of the mellows of conjugal love that unite Radha with Krishna. Thus, being enchanted by their divine love, I will madly sing the glories of Sri Radha just like a raving lunatic. This final verse is profoundly sweet. The practitioner or sadhaka envisions a simple everyday activity, carrying a water pot to the banks of the Yamuna. Yet, even this ordinary village task is infused with remembrance of Radha and Krishna's divine love. Absorbed, enchanted, almost maddened by their sweetness, the devotee begins singing Radha's glories just like a lunatic, not out of distress, but out of overwhelming affection. This is the true perfection of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 7. Engaging the active organs in work, the mind fully controlled, and the senses directed toward pure devotion, not by force or duty, but by spontaneous love. A simple act, fetching water, becomes intimate internal service. In this one song, Bhaktivinoda takes us from the renunciation of bodily identity to identification with Vraj, the eternal spiritual world where Krishna eternally resides, to longing for the service of Shrimati Radharani, to performing daily activities infused with divine remembrance. This is the living example of Bhagavad Gita 3:7, the highest expression of controlled senses engaged in devotion. It is not repression, it is absorption, it is love. So for us, the invitation of Bhagavad Gita chapter 3 verse 7 is very gentle. Krishna is not asking us to suppress our senses or to force our minds into submission. He is asking us to engage, to turn toward devotion again and again, even in small ways. As that engagement matures, a higher taste gradually awakens. And as that taste grows, the mind naturally rests where it finds sweetness. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur shows us where this path ultimately leads, not so that we can imitate his inner life, but so that we trust the direction of devotion. If we simply continue serving sincerely, chanting, hearing, associating with devotees, and offering our daily activities to Krishna, then in time, restraint gives way to attraction, effort gives way to affection, and duty quietly blossoms into love. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Krsnacandra Peru, for those reflections. I
Thank
think
you.
you were just answering all of my questions as you, kind of went through that discussion. We
Mhm.
have some really nice comments from Colleen. Thank you,
Oh,
Colleen, for
good.
joining us today.
Good.
I think you touched on some really important points, right? Like we are
Mhm.
just riding this wave of ups and downs.
Mhm.
And you also touched on, the fact that I think there are a lot of misconceptions about, when we pick up a spiritual path, it's about what we're going to stop doing, right? And what we're
Right.
going to stop kind of being, right? There's that association, right, with giving up a lot of things, but
Yeah.
you touch on an important other side of that, right? Which is,
Right.
to still be who you are and do the things that you do. But yeah, just
Right.
kind of, reframing, right? The way that we're
Exactly.
thinking
Yes.
about that.
Hmm. I mean, I feel like, for example, it's not like we're mourning over the loss of all the things that we enjoyed through unbridled, material desires for things. We're actually we're starting to have a personal relationship with the divine, and when we have that personal relationship with the divine, then naturally everything else starts to lose its meaning. I mean, within appropriate time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, right. We want to try to develop that higher taste and then thinking, right, about developing that relationship. I
Yeah.
guess if we're thinking, right, like any one of us right now or anyone watching this at any point could think, like, okay, I mean, what do I do that I could potentially offer to my spiritual practice? Maybe I have a job. Maybe I have a family. Maybe there's something I'm good at, or maybe I'm a person
Right.
like maybe I don't feel like I'm really good at anything, right? Like, what
Yes.
are those first small steps we can start to take?
I mean, it's, for example, I mean, we see this in the life of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was a magistrate, like a judge. And, like, I think many of us, when we think of like a judge or a lawyer, we think, oh, this is so materialistic. There's
Yeah.
so much like karma involved in like,
Mhm.
you
I
know,
do.
like committing actions that can really, change people's lives in
Yeah.
profound, ways, materially at least. But then, first of all, I mean, the way Krishna has directed Arjuna, when he was the kshatriya, the like the potential, part of the ruling family, the Pandavas. I mean, he was directed by Krishna to direct his actions in devotion, not to even change. He wanted to be an ascetic at some point. He wanted to give up. He wanted to quit, and he didn't want to fight anymore. But he just wanted to, maybe, like, for example, live in the forest. But then Krishna rebuked him and told him that this was essentially his destiny to go, and he had these gifts. He had the greatest gift, to fight, and he was the greatest fighter, and he was taught this from a young age. So it's like, it's to really, like, you may think, for example, like, oh, I have these gifts, and they don't look like the path of spirituality. For example, a fighter. How can a fighter manifest his fighting abilities to make it into an act of love for God Himself? Um, it's like, I don't know. For some reason, my mind gets into these tangents for, what do you call it? Like, I think of movies, for example. I was just thinking about a movie, um, Castaway. When you see, like, Tom Hanks is opening all these packages, and it's like a soccer ball, and like, how am I going to use these things to get off the island? And it's like, sometimes we look at our own gifts, the things we have, and it's like, oh, how does this relate to my spiritual life, my higher calling?
Yeah.
So it does come together. It comes together through realization, through faith, really.
That's powerful. Yeah, there's like, we're always thinking about what we don't have or what we would like to have or when I have this thing, but
Yeah,
yeah, like, what is here? What do I have? And these are the tools that I need
exactly.
to get me off the island, right? And
Right, right.
I love that. And I feel like just through this class, right? Like, Krishna's saying, like, no, don't change, just be you
Yeah.
100%. And yeah, use what you have. So yeah, I think that definitely gives us a lot to reflect on this week as we
Mhm.
really just start to kind of delve into chapter 3. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for sharing those insights. We really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure always. I'm really, when I get these assignments, it causes me to, like, really look in myself, say, how can I share this with everyone? And it's like, when I get to that point, it's like the moment of inspiration. It's like, I never thought of these things before. So just having this opportunity is a gift of learning for myself.
Yeah, well, that's great. It's a gift for you. It's a gift for all of us. So thank
Mhm.
you so much again, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you all. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you again, everyone who joined us today. You can join us live every Monday at 7:30 p.m. and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you soon.